His first encounter was June 10th, 1982. He was following a herd of elk. He noticed some strange activity, so he got out of his truck to follow them on foot when he started to smell something that just wasn't normal. He started around a little corner in that logging spur road, and here come, in his own words, this critter.
From coming across some strange and unusual footprints that compelled this special ops team to dive deep into the snowy wilderness, to the strange experience that they would have in the middle of the night, here's what happened when this special ops team followed Bigfoot into the forests in Alaska before it took a dark turn. Those who wade into the uncertain waters of searching for the mysterious cryptid have a thankless job at hand. It was never an easy task to begin with. Just think of all the people who have gone in search of creatures such as the Loch Ness Monster or the Chupacabra. Although there are some that may have come away with evidence that some of these creatures may actually exist, it's fair to say that they are not taken seriously most of the time. This is probable due to the fact that the pseudoscience of cryptozoology has always been taken with a pinch of salt. Despite such a reputation, there are those who still push on with this chase of the unknown, hoping that they will be the ones that will succeed in bringing the secrets of some of these mysterious creatures to light. Special Ops Shocking Encounter. Sometimes the people who end up shining more light on the nature of some of these creatures are those who knew nothing about them to begin with. Just take a look at the time this special ops team was just trying to carry out this training exercise in the middle of the snowy mountains back in 1994. While they were making sure that they honed their skills as Army combatants, they had no idea that they would also be adding to the lore of the legendary cryptid that is Bigfoot. By now, at least those of us on the continent of North America should be familiar with Bigfoot, the giant, hairy humanoid creature that is said to lurk around in the forests in North America. For hundreds of years now, its myth has been supported by thousands of sightings of this creature. Despite this, there are many who still claim that Bigfoot isn't real. It doesn't help that nobody has been able to come up with concrete proof that it exists. Sure, there have been photos and videos of the creature, but their blurry and grainy nature just doesn't help the matter. Regardless of this, though, there are still many who believe that Bigfoot is somewhere out there in one of the many forests found in North America. With a bit of luck, and perhaps with better cameras, they may be able to bring the mysterious nature of this creature to an end. For now, though, we also have encounters such as that of the Special Ops team back in the early months of 1994. Thinking about it, this may have been the best time for the Special Ops team to experience such an encounter, looking at how many Bigfoot sightings have been detailed to occur at such times. Regardless of the timing, this would still be a shocking experience for the team, as they had no idea about what they were walking into. As they made their way through the snowy mountains, all they had their minds on was their mission to make sure they honed their strategic reconnaissance skills to the best of their abilities. This seemed to involve them taking part in drilling exercises that had them sneaking into a target zone. Once they get there, they observe their environment quietly before leaving without being noticed. As impressive as that may be to accomplish, all that was put aside when they just happened to come across something that proved to be so shocking, they had to return to their base. Looking at the situation now, it takes our minds to how the team prepared for the mission before they set out into those snowy mountains. Thinking about how such soldiers operate, you know that they are trained to prepare for every possible scenario out there, so they would know how to handle anything that they could possibly come across in the snowy wilderness. For example, they had gone out there with skis so that they could easily maneuver their way through the snowy mountains. They also had backpacks filled with important items ranging from their tents to their survival gear, and as such, they were certain that they would be able to perform this training exercise in what could prove to be a hostile environment. As such, it will actually make you think about what could be so shocking, so triggering that these soldiers had to return to base. The plan was for them to make their way east from Fairbanks so that they could head to the Elson Air Force Base. Looking at said route, you could see that it meant that they had to cut through the tough, snowy terrain filled with steep bridges, deep valleys, and dense forests. As time went on, the team saw that they were in a certain thick area in the forest. Despite being found in such a bushy area, Captain Miles, the head of the team, decided that it may be best for them to get an understanding of the area so that they can confirm that they could actually make their way through these woods. This was because he was in charge of making sure that all his men made it to their destination safe and well, even if it meant that they would have to go around the bush rather than through it. As they plodded through the snow while scouting the area, the team would be left in a state of awe due to what they would eventually come across. This discovery came in a set of human-like footprints that were so huge, the team was convinced that it couldn't be real. To be honest, if you were in their shoes, you'd probably have the exact same reactions. After all, these footprints were about 18 to 19 feet long, if you can believe that. Looking at the footprints, it forces us to wonder about what sort of creature could be big enough to make such footprints.
They found some footprints, some very large footprints, about 18, 19 inches long in the snow with a really wide stride to them.
Considering how huge they were, you couldn't convince any of the members of the Special Ops team that some human made those footprints. Furthermore, the pattern of the footprints were too distinct from that of any of the soldiers. This added more credence to the fact that maybe some human being didn't make this at all. Again, the footprints would force the men to ponder on who or what could have made these strange footprints in the snow. Once they considered the size of the footprints, the depths of the footprints in the snow and the pattern, they had to accept that this creature also seemed to move with a speed and agility that could not be attributed to humans. When they came to this conclusion, they realized that they may have been exposed to something that they were definitely not ready for at all. Momentarily left in a state of shock and awe as to what they saw in the snow, they were forced to think about what may actually be running around in the snowy landscape of Alaska. Not wanting to lose out on any more possible information as to what they had just seen in the snow, the team decided that it may be best for them to reach out to their sergeant. This seemed to be a great move because the sergeant is believed to be the best tracker on the entire team. It seemed as though he had earned his reputation well because after coming across the footprints, he was able to tell that this creature must have been 9 feet tall. He was also able to estimate that it could be anything between 500 pounds to 700 pounds. Now that is one big boy. With such estimates, they were certain that this was no human. Even the Big Show and Shaq don't have those dimensions. Once they were able to agree on this, they were also able to agree on another important fact. If they were going to learn any more about the creature that left these footprints behind, they were just going to have to follow the trail of footprints that it left behind. This proved to be a good move because as they followed the footprints, the men started to understand how this creature was able to maneuver its way through the snowy mountains and the surrounding forests nearby. Tracking the footprints also helped the men figure out how it must have evaded human eyes for so long. It must have done so by sticking to the top of ridges as they made their way through the trees found in the thick Alaskan forest. This route and pattern of movement told the men that the creature was very familiar with this environment. Perhaps even more disturbingly, the pattern that they observed as they followed the trail seemed to suggest that the creature was intelligent, at least to a certain degree. This was because it seemed to maintain similar tactics to that of the team when they were trying to avoid being spotted by others. Looking at all this information, the team couldn't help but get more interested in this strange creature that they were following around in the middle of nowhere. Hoping to perhaps put a face or figure to whatever they were following out there, they decided that they would have to carry on with the search for the strange creature. Before that could happen, though, the team was forced to accept their limitations. They acknowledged the deep snow that was before them, and this would be a huge factor that would slow them down. Despite this, they decided to push on. Turns out that they may have prepared for such an obstacle as they had packed some skis and snowshoes with them. With this, they continued on with their tracking, plodding deeper and deeper into the snowy wilderness. Strange encounter in the night.
Each year, there are hundreds of Bigfoot sightings across the country.
It got pretty hairy in that night. If I feel compromised or I feel like that we're in danger, I'll go right into the woods and attempt to approach these things.
As captivating as this impromptu tracking mission had become, the team was forced to realize that they may have been running out of time. Nighttime was beckoning, and they were still in the middle of nowhere, plodding in the snow. With night falling, the team figured that maybe it was best for them to call it a day. With that decided, they began to set up camp. After they tucked themselves in, they probably stared at the stars as they waited for sleep to take them. They would be in for a surprise when they learned that their day was far from over. Some hours later, Miles suddenly shot up from his sleep. Somehow, he was the only one to react to the strange noise that was ripping through the silence of the night. Indistinguishable from a howl or a roar, it disturbed the silence of the sleeping men. Miles stirred in his spot, thinking that he may have been woken up by some lone wolf wandering around nearby. This would not be an unusual occurrence, but there was just something about this noise that unsettled the spirit. For example, this was sort of a solitary howl. If wolves came in packs, there surely would be more than one howl on such a night. Aside from this fact, Miles just couldn't let go of the fact that this howl just didn't sound like it was made by a wolf. That Miles was forced to consider that there was something much larger than a wolf out there, and he wasn't sure that was a great thing at all. Now at full attention, Miles did his best to listen for any other noise that could tell him more about what was going on out there. Although the noises would eventually calm down, Miles would be startled back to attention when another howling noise ripped through the silence of the night. As bad as the noise was on its own, this time it was even more frightening because it seemed like the howl had gotten a lot closer to their camp. As you can imagine, this was a frightening prospect for him and his team. Something large and violent was moving towards them at alarming speeds. That would not do at all. For a moment or two, Miles hoped that this creature that may be approaching them was not as violent as he feared. Maybe it wasn't a wolf. Maybe it was even a bear. As much as that may have been better for Miles to stomach, he was at a loss because most bears would be hibernating at that time of the year. Actually, maybe they were in an even worse position because if they happened to disturb the rest of a hibernating bear, then they were still in a ton of trouble. Suddenly, the noise came to a stop. This served to bring an end to Miles's frightening thoughts. This seemed to be perfect for Miles because his men began to wake up. How they slept through all that noise we do not know, but they would soon be filled in on the unsettling events of the past few minutes. That said, the silence still did not mean that the situation wasn't still intense. As unsettling as the situation was, Miles and his team decided that it may be best to be alert at this point in time. Only God knew what was out there, and if they weren't careful, it would catch them with their pants down, and they would not like that. Right now, they knew that they could feel the creature's presence as it stalked their camp. What they didn't know for sure was what exactly this creature was. All they knew was that they could hear that it wasn't too far away due to the constant rustling that they could hear outside. Now, sharp and alert, the men decided that they were going to come out from their tents. It may be the best thing to confront what was lurking in the darkness head-on. That could be the only way that they could even know what was causing this fear once and for all. Despite coming to terms with their fears, the team must have been disappointed when it seemed as though their presence may have scared the creature away. What else could explain the sudden silence that followed the frightening encounter? To make the situation even more unsettling, the team was shaken back to life when another unsettling howl tore through the unnerving silence. It seemed to be so chilling, it seemed more like a scream this time, unnerving the men even more as they tried to figure out what was going on. They wished they had some live ammunition on them, but alas, as a result, the team was forced to come to terms with the fact that they would have to abandon this mission. They did not feel safe in the fact that they would have to confront this unknown creature without protection, especially as it could lead to the death of one of the members of his team. Another sound soon startled them out of their wits. This was the sound of a tree being ripped from its roots as it was toppled over. With that, they were certain that they were having one of the strangest encounters when several of these trees began to fall before them. With such a scene coming into play, you didn't need to tell the men twice that they needed to get out of there. With that in mind, they began to pack their things up even before the day broke. To be honest, they didn't have a real choice in the matter. They just needed to learn about what happened a few hours ago, so they decided to carry out a little investigation of the place where they had heard all the noise. This is when they realized something harrowing. Those large footprints seemed to have come close to their camping site at some point in time in the night. Good Lord. As they analyzed the footprints, the team realized that they were mostly around the parts of the region where the snow had been packed down. This told them that the creature had been pacing back and forth while it had been stalking them. What may even be more disturbing is that there was a broken pine tree nearby. That must have been the source of the cracking noise they had heard earlier on, because it had been broken in half. Looking at the evidence before them, You couldn't blame Miles and his men for being shaken by this experience. You also couldn't blame them for being convinced that there was a large, frightening creature nearby with violent tendencies. Even worse, it seemed to have been stalking them as they made their way to their camping site last night. This was truly scary because they had no weapons with them, and as such they would be vulnerable to whatever this scary creature throws at them should it decide to do so. You can't even blame them for being frightened that it could attack them because it had literally split a tree in half. Who knew what they had encountered while they were out there? As they too couldn't even imagine what could be large enough to make those footprints and split those trees in half, they decided that maybe it would be best for them to keep the details of last night to themselves. Miles was especially sensitive to this, as he didn't want to be part of any rumors that could emerge from such an encounter. All he wanted to do was focus on his main job, make sure the men were safe while also making sure they accomplished their mission. Considering the fact that they had been spotted by this mysterious creature, we're not sure that he can even boast of that. With such thoughts in mind, the men made their way through the snowy wilderness in silence, hoping to complete their mission without having any other frightening encounters with the unknown creature that seemed to be coming for them in the dead of night. Now that he was certain that he was working in tandem with his men, Miles was happy that they all seemed to agree that the events of the last night may be best left unsaid. To try their best to leave the area as undisturbed as possible, the men figured this was the best conclusion to come to, because they didn't want to disturb something that could easily snuff them out without making any effort at all. With such thoughts in mind, the men made their silent progression away from the camp, hoping that they would not disturb the overwhelmingly powerful forces of nature any further. As this mission came to an end, the team couldn't help but wonder about what was actually out there that frightful night. Sure, they decided that it may be best to keep those details about their mission from others, but they still were desperate for answers. That must have been one of the most frightening experiences of their entire lives, and it may make some sense to learn more about what may have been responsible for it. They could only speculate that this was a frightening encounter with the legendary cryptid that is Bigfoot. From coming across some strange and unusual footprints that compelled this team of special ops men to dive deep into the snowy wilderness to the strange experience that they would have in the middle of the night. Here's what happened when this special ops team followed Bigfoot into the forests in Alaska before it took a dark turn.